Hello, my name is Matt Shar, and today we are going to continue in our discussion of the arguments from natural theology by evaluating the concept of objective moral values and duties as evidence of the existence of God. This line of reasoning falls under a subset of natural theology called arguments from transcendence. Arguments from transcendence establish the existence of God by seeking out and analyzing the foundations of ultimate reality. Before we analyze the steps from the existence of objective moral values and duties to the existence of God, we have to establish the difference between an objective truth or law and a subjective opinion. An example of an objective truth is the fact that 2 plus 2 equals 4. This truth is established by the objective law of mathematics. Even if every single human on the planet was convinced that 2 plus 2 equaled something other than 4, it would not in any way impact the truth of the matter. An objective truth is something that is true irrespective of human opinion. An example of a subjective opinion would be a person's belief that vanilla tastes better than chocolate. This is a subjective opinion because the truth or falsehood of the statement, vanilla tastes better than chocolate, is strictly dependent upon the opinion of the subject. There is no law like mathematics that dictates which flavor is better. A subjective opinion is something that is true for one person but could be false for another. That being said, we can establish a working definition of objective moral values and duties by describing them in the following way.
If there are objective moral values, then there are some acts which are truly good and some that are truly evil, irrespective of any human's opinion. If morality is objective, it would mean that even if every single human on earth believed that rape or murder were morally acceptable, they would be objectively wrong, in the same way that a person who says 2 plus 2 equals 6 is objectively wrong. If there are objective moral duties, then there are some instances in which it is necessarily true that a person should carry out a certain action. This would mean that a person who believed that a parent does not have a moral obligation to provide for their child is objectively wrong, in the same way that a person who says that there could be such a thing as a square circle or married bachelor is objectively wrong.
Affirming objective moral values and duties logically entails the belief that there is a transcendent and objective moral law that exists independently of human opinion, just like the transcendent and objective laws of mathematics or logic. If one person says that murder is morally evil, and another says it is morally good, then one is truly right and another is truly wrong. Denying objective moral values and duties logically requires one to affirm that morality is ultimately subjective. If morality is ultimately subjective, then good or evil is only a human concept and there is no transcendent moral truth that is binding on all of us. If one person says charity is good and another says stealing is good, then each person's opinion is equally valid and neither is binding on anyone else. A person may object to this and say that even if there is no transcendent objective moral law, people can still recognize that something like murder or stealing hurts a person, so it is morally wrong. But that argument smuggles in the assumption that it is objectively true that it is morally evil to hurt a person. If morality is subjective, then the idea that it is bad to hurt a person is no more than a subjective opinion. If a person disagrees with that opinion, then they are not really wrong, they just hold an unpopular opinion. If it is objectively true that it is morally evil to hurt a person, then there is a transcendent and objective moral law, which is exactly the thing the person stating this argument is denying. Any objection stated in which the objector declares a certain behavior to be morally wrong by stating its consequences will ultimately fail for the same reason. If morality is subjective, then nothing binds us to the opinion that human suffering should be prevented or human existence perpetuated. Any moral statement made would be no more than a declaration of personal opinion and preference, no more valid or binding than a preference of chocolate over vanilla. However, if morality is objective, then it turns out that we have incredibly powerful evidence for the existence of God.
How does the existence of objective moral values and duties logically entail the existence of a personal creator God?
In order to understand how the existence of objective moral values and duties logically entail the existence of a creator God, it is helpful to contrast moral values and duties with the laws governing the material universe. Laws like gravity, entropy, or the strong nuclear force are just descriptions of how things normally function. These laws are descriptive and mindless. However, an objective moral law would not describe how things do happen, but what should or should not happen in a given situation. Moral values and duties are not descriptive, they are prescriptive. An intelligent personal agent is required to consider and prescribe moral actions. The mindless laws of physics will determine how fast a bullet will travel, but only an intelligent personal agent can consider the moral factors involved and tell you if it is morally acceptable to fire it at a given target. If moral values and duties are objective, then there is a transcendent moral law that exists. If there is an objective moral law, then there is a transcendent and intelligent personal agent who establishes moral values and prescribes moral duties. The fact that moral values and duties are established by this person means that their nature, or will, sets the moral standard. In the same way that the objective law of mathematics cannot be in error, the standard set by this moral lawgiver cannot be in error, so this person is morally perfect. The transcendent, intelligent, morally perfect personal agent who determines moral values and prescribes moral duties is the being who theists identify as God. If it is objectively true that molesting a child is evil in the same way that it is objectively true that 2 plus 2 equals 4, then that means a personal creator God exists. Put simply, if there is an objective moral law, there must be an objective moral lawgiver.
How can we be sure that an objective moral law actually exists?
We may find that a person is uncertain in their beliefs regarding the existence of objective moral values and duties. In this situation, it can be helpful to ask them, does it really seem reasonable to you that moral values and duties are just a matter of personal opinion, and that there is no act, no matter how atrocious, that is truly evil? If a person is willing to bite the bullet and answer that question in the affirmative, then it can be helpful to use illustrations that are personally relevant to the person you are talking to. Moral gray areas like a man stealing bread to feed his starving children will not illustrate the point very clearly. In order to get the point across, you will have to use a pretty extreme example of something that is obviously evil, like raping or torturing a child. There is no rationalization a person can use to justify doing something so despicable, and there is no possible world in which such an act would be morally justifiable. Generally, a person cannot stomach the idea that something so atrocious being called evil is just a matter of opinion, and will concede the obvious truth that hurting children in that way is truly and objectively evil. This is a kind of truth for which no one should reasonably have to give evidence or an argument to demonstrate its veracity. It is innate within every single one of us, and we all know it to be true. This brings us to a category of knowledge called properly basic beliefs.
A properly basic belief is a belief which is held as a self-evident truth that is justified by personal experience or intuition.
Properly basic beliefs are things that we just know to be true. For example, the fact that we have freedom of the will, and that there is a real external world around us which contains other persons. Technically speaking, it is possible that we are living in the Matrix, that we all simultaneously came into existence 4 seconds ago with fake memories programmed into our brains, or that you are the only person who actually exists, and everyone else exists only in your imagination. However, reasonable people do not need arguments or evidence to support the idea that other people actually exist, and that the external world around them is real. In the same way, we are perfectly justified in affirming that there is an objective and transcendent moral law as a properly basic belief.
What are the most common objections to the existence of objective moral values and duties?
One common objection to the existence of objective morality is that societal moral norms have changed over time. This line of argumentation is based on a logical fallacy called a category error. A category error happens when something that belongs to a certain category is presented as though it belongs in a different category. This category error is confusing the category moral epistemology, which is the process of people coming to know the truth about morality, with moral ontology, which is the objective foundation for moral values and duties and whether or not one exists. This argument is logically equivalent to saying that the laws of mathematics are not objective because people have slowly discovered and learned to apply them over time. Any argument against the objectivity of morality that is based upon humans discovering, understanding, or applying moral laws commits the same logical error. The next objection is actually a famous objection called the Euthyphro dilemma.
The Euthyphro dilemma is presented as a dichotomy, which is supposed to undermine the concept of God as the foundation of objective moral values and duties. The so-called dilemma is stated by asking which one of the following statements is true. 1. Is something good because God commands it? If so, then morality is subjective and arbitrary because it is based upon the commands of a subject. Or 2. Does God command a certain thing because it is good? If so, then morality is objective, but God is subservient to a standard above himself. The Euthyphro dilemma is a logically invalid argument for 2 reasons. First, it is a false dichotomy, because there is a third option. That option is that God's nature is the objective good, and his commands flow necessarily from his nature. It would be a logical impossibility for his commands to be anything other than perfect, because he is perfect. Second, The subject in question is God. He is eternal, immortal, unchanging, all-powerful, all-knowing, has absolute authority, and has no equal. Therefore, there is no state of affairs in which the moral law will change, or that a contrary opinion could become the standard. Just like 2 plus 2 could never equal anything other than 4, rape could never be morally permissible.
All this being said, now we can put this argument in deductive form so that it can be easily memorized and shared with others.
The deductive form of the moral argument can be stated in the following way. Step 1. If objective moral values and duties exist, then God exists. Step 2. Our moral sense reveals to us that objective moral values and duties do exist. Conclusion. Therefore, God exists.
In summary, we learned that if objective moral values and duties do not exist, then the foundation of morality is subjective, and there is no objectively binding way to adjudicate between two opposing moral perspectives. Then, we learned that the existence of objective moral values can be held as a properly basic belief, just like our belief that there is a real external world around us populated with other persons. Then we learned that moral considerations can only be made by intelligent personal agents. So if a transcendent and objective moral law exists, then God exists. If there is an objective moral law, there is a moral lawgiver. Then we learned that the arguments against the existence of objective morality that are based upon humans discovering morality are committing a logical fallacy called a category error, and that the Euthyphro dilemma is a false dichotomy. In closing, any moral system that denies the existence of objective morality leaves good and evil as merely human concepts, which have no foundation outside of personal subjective opinion. But deep down, we all know that there are some things that are truly evil and some things that are truly good. That being the case, we are rationally justified in making the inference that God exists. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.